Welcome to Live, Work, Thrive. I'm Michaela Birmingham, Scary Mommy Executive Producer, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's panel. As we trudge through month 8 of this pandemic, lockdown is starting to look more like lifestyle. These uncertain times have been tough, especially for moms, but is it all bad? Tonight, our panel will discuss the upside of lockdown and how, despite all the reasons we want to reboot the hellish year of 2020 completely, we have adapted in unique ways, sometimes for the better. Now join me in welcoming our panelists. We have Dr. Shefali, clinical psychologist and New York Times bestselling author. Her latest book is called Superpowered, and Oprah has endorsed her work as revolutionary and life-changing. Thank you for being with us tonight, Dr. Shefali.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Argie Allen Wilson, relationship expert and author of the book Courageous Conversations Connect. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Argie.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's going to be my pleasure.
And later on, we will hear from Dr. Ann Fishel, family therapist, clinical psychologist, and professor at Harvard Medical School, as well as co-founder of the NEAT method, Marissa Hagmeyer. Before we get started, I just have a few quick reminders for everyone watching tonight. You can submit questions and interact in the chat room. We might even feature your question later on in the show. So if you'd like to ask something of our experts tonight, feel free. Mobile users can also email your questions to liveworkthrive@scarymommy.com. And if you are one of the first 100 to RSVP tonight, look out for your free gift, this cool mask from the Scary Mommy shop. Sign up early for all upcoming events and get your own free gift. All right, let's dive into tonight's topic. So the pandemic is rough. We have tragedy, we have death, we are separated from our loved ones, we have lost jobs, our essential workers are shouldering a huge burden, and families are doing remote or hybrid virtual learning. Under all that, though, could we actually be adapting in ways that are positive? The first thing I want to touch on now is working parents. So Dr. Argie, let's start with you. With many parents working from home, kids now have the opportunity to observe, if not overhear, their parents doing work. What are the benefits of this?
Well, before, and I think that's a great question for all the parents out there, before you had to sort of take your daughter or your son to work day, right? And so there's one day where you take them, you drudge them into work and they get to see what you do. Now they get to see how you're multitasking. They get to see actually the discipline. They also get to see the structure that you're putting in place and the scheduling and even the multitasking. And so while, yes, it takes a little bit of time to get your sea legs, if you will, especially with all the moving parts and the homeschooling and the scheduling and the incessant Zoom meetings that all of us have to be in, I do think that it certainly gives our children a sense of pride about what their parents are doing and certainly a sense of motivation so that they recognize, hey, if my parents can do this, then perhaps the bar is set really high, but I can do it as well. And I think it gives another opportunity to have, quite frankly, what I like to call in the book, the courageous conversation, even for kids to be able to see what they don't want to do. Certainly, if they think like their parents are working too much or if their parents are really not spending enough time with them, really gives them the opportunity to talk about the things that they were never talking about before because people weren't home. Right? We haven't lived our lives like this in the past. The majority of us have lived our lives outside of our homes, right?
Exactly.
Working for 9, 10 hours and then overscheduling ourselves and our kids. Now we have a different new norm and we can capitalize and leverage that.
So Dr. Shefali, do you think, to build on what Dr. just said, do you think there is a benefit, especially let's think about young girls, for example, observing their mothers in leadership roles at home, on the job? What does that impact have on their daughters who might be seeing this for the first time?
Yeah, I think children and partners can develop a real unique appreciation for what women do in a day, and I'm constantly telling my own daughter, she's almost 18, yeah, this is what mom does in a day, and how we juggle all the multifacets of our lives. I think it's a unique, powerful portal to allow for this integration of work and family and home and business. And yeah, it's a muddle and it's chaotic, but as we are doing right now, we're picking out the jewels in the mud, and we're highlighting that because it's difficult. But our task as leaders, as family mommies and business owners, it's our job to create a vision for our employees, for our families, for our children. And part of that envisioning is highlighting the jewels, and that's what this conversation is about. So look for the jewels. There's so much power in telling your children, this is what it means to run an integrated life. This is what it means to be holistic, and exposing them to the stressors of the day, but also the ability that we have to manage them.
That's such a nice way of putting it. Look for the jewels. And I think that also probably works the reverse, right? So Dr. Argie, would you say that the same is true for parents observing or overhearing their young children learning and doing virtual school? You might not know what exactly goes on in a third grade math class. I mean, depending on the age of your child, you may be intimately aware because you are now their teacher for the younger ones who need a lot more help. But I do think, there might be that also a little bit of empathy that you're now learning as a parent that you didn't have before. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting that you say that, because the truth is now homework used to be when you went home and you did work, right? Now homework is that you're home and you're working, and that's for the adults and that's for the children. And so it does give parents a new appreciation. What I'm hearing from my children in the practice is that sometimes they're feeling overwhelmed. They're often feeling like they're overscheduled with a lot of busy work. So this gives the parents a unique bird's eye view of what their children are actually having to experience with the online learning. And then some people are in a hybrid. And so what I'm saying to them is have the conversation, talk about what your children are experiencing, share ask them what their feelings are about that and their emotions, ask them what their friends are how they're dealing with it, so that they get a different experience and certainly a different form of connection from that parent, because their parent is actually seeing it for themselves. And the kid doesn't necessarily have to say, oh, this is what happened in school. They know what's happening in school. So that's helpful. But I would say that this is a unique opportunity to really talk about what doesn't feel good, right? For children and for their parents. I think that one of the big, Dr. Shefali would say the jewels. One of those jewels is that sometimes we tend to try to pretend like we've got it all together, right? That we don't have any flaws, that we're not, the moms or the dads or the children, we've got it all figured out. Well, guess what? When you're now home doing work, you get to see the flaws, the areas where you still have to work. We call them growth areas, and what your strengths are. And I think that we can leverage all of that.
So let's talk about that. I think that you raise a good point with that, because, some working parents, myself included, kind of find it stressful to try and get work done at home with interruptions. Your partner might stroll into the kitchen and, they're coming in for a snack. You're in the middle of it. And they're like, oh, did you pay that bill? And you're like, I don't have time to talk to you about that because I'm in the middle of an important thing here. But they don't get it because they're, doing something else, or the kids are interrupting. So what are some strategies, again, looking at the jewels, strategies to turn this, Dr. Shefali, maybe you can tell us, from a frustrating moment to more of a teachable moment, or turn it from mud to a jewel? I need some strategies here for, taking these experiences and really making them work for us long term.
Well, I think first we need to have a transcendent view of this moment in global history and really understand it, I like to say from a wisdom perspective, which is this is a real expose into our obsession with future-based planning gone awry, our obsession with achievement and success gone awry, our obsession with success and this kind of distracted culture that we were so mired in, and now that's gone awry. We were on this track going to nowhere, really. And now we're off the track to nowhere and we're all upset. But if we really step back and remember what crazy, overscheduled, over-compulsive lives we were living, we will realize that track was dysfunctional. It was toxic. It was it was messing families up. Publishers approached myself and my co-author 3 years ago to write a book on anxiety called Superpowered. This is the book. But we wrote this book because 3 years ago, anxiety was at an all-time high. 1 in every 5 children in the US was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And now we've released this book in the middle of the pandemic, never knowing that anxiety was going to be astronomical. So we were on this pathway hurtling down a slippery slope into dysfunction. And this COVID, this pandemic, the biggest blessing in disguise is that it's gotten us off that track to nowhere and planted us firmly in the present moment. Now, the present moment is chaotic because we've never been here before. Mm-hmm. We've never lived all together, interconnected, interdependent, integrated. We're like, no. We want to go back to our little cubicles and our compartments. Children go off to school, husband go here, I'll go there. We want our glitz and our glamour. We want our addictions and our distractions. And all of that has gone awry. So this frustration we're feeling is because we are now in a new place. We are in this portal, in this birthing canal, but we haven't come to the other side yet. So if we really come to realize that this is our moment of rest, our moment of pause, there's no need to get frustrated. Everyone's Zoom calls are getting interrupted. Everyone's kids are, frustrated, and everyone's in this funky place for a good reason. It's a reset button. It's an opportunity to realize we weren't doing so well back then. Let's not all be so keen to go back then. This is an opportunity to redo education, to redo family, to reconnect to who it is we are. Now, if we don't use this opportunity and we're simply chomping at the bit to go back to what was, we're going to lose this moment in time. I've been teaching meditation every day online. I've been doing online wisdom classes to teach people that this is our opportunity to reset. So all those frustrations will go away once you have the right perspective that what wasn't so great. Our kids were suffering. Marriages were in trouble. We were addicted, and we still are, but now it's an opportunity to change track. Are we going to use this opportunity to go through this portal and come out, emerge in a new way tomorrow?
That's such a great way of looking at it. And I think on that point, one of the things that I think I'm going to say I see as an upside is that we've all narrowed our social circles. Most of us have anyway. And we're focusing now, because we have no choice, on quality relationships with only a few, whether that be our family or, a trusted friend or another family nearby that we're all agreeing to, pod and only interact with each other safely. So as opposed to a wider circle with maybe a less quality of relationship, we're kind of paring things down to, our favorites and the people who we want to be around, the people who make us feel good, the people that we trust. Dr. Argie, what do you think is, the impact of this kind of, whittling down of, let's call it, the obsession of, going to every party and answering every phone call and invitation, where now we don't do that anymore?
Well, that's an excellent question. I do agree with Dr. Shefali from the perspective of the fact that in the past, although many of us say we just want to get back to the way things used to be, the way things used to be, if we really are honest with ourselves, wasn't that great. We were all overwhelmed. We were all stressed out. We were all overtasked and multitasking and juggling. And so now we do have this opportunity to really think about how do we manage in the space that we're in. And when we think about like the next phase of our reality, and I think about like, how do we have what I like to say is the courageous conversations about the next phase of our lives? How do we talk with our families and our children? And how do we even talk with our friends? We've had to have some difficult conversations in these pods, where you may have a friend that wants to go on vacation and they're trying to influence you to do so, but then you've now decided that you've got this pod and that you trust that pod, and that may not necessarily, they may not fit in that pod. So usually around this time of the year, I start asking people to think about, this is sort of the fourth quarter, even before COVID, who adds to your life, who multiplies, who subtracts from your life and who divides. And I always say we've got to put our oxygen mask on first. And as we make ourselves a priority, that doesn't mean that everyone is going to be satisfied with the decisions that we make. And so as we move forward into this, this COVID that maybe we're even in a second wave, if we have to really kind of condense our groups of people and narrow that, that's okay. It's possible that, as you said, that perhaps everyone wasn't meant to be in that space anyway, and that we do have to honor the quality of the relationship versus the quantity. Actually, how many of us in the social media space really have thousands of friends, right, in a lifetime? I'm not so sure. I mean, I think that with the language that we've learned to use in the social media space is that, do you friend me? Do you like me? But even in the book, in the Courageous Conversations, the first chapter is radical self-care and action, because I think we haven't done such a great job taking care of ourselves. And we do need to reset, as Dr. Shefali says. A pathway to reset your mindset with intentional thoughts from the inside out allows us to be more grounded. But if we're always on a hamster wheel, then we can't have those courageous conversations with ourselves. We certainly can't have them with our children or with our partners or with our friends. So this is a time to reflect on the chaotic lives that we were living, and then figure out what is it that we really want, and how do we then create that going through the birth canal, as I just heard Dr. Fishel say, and getting to the other side. And we got to be healthy to do that, but not just healthy physically. It's mind, body, and spirit. It's all connected.
For sure. And so I think, given that we're in this pandemic, there's a lot of fear, right? There's a lot of knowns. Every day it seems like there's more bad news about, whatever country is spiking, or across the US, you're seeing the numbers climb. So there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of uncertainty. They're predicting the winter may even be more challenging. I'd love to know, Dr. Shefali, from your work with anxiety and trauma and other, mental health issues, is there a bond effect between family and friends who go through challenging times like this together? When you get through it, does that kind of cement relationships? I think about 9/11 a lot as a New Yorker, and I know all the coworkers that I walked home with that day, we're all still friends and we all still keep in touch. And I really do think that there's like a bond of folks who have, really experienced things like that. I mean, I think this is an odd one because it's everyone in the world, right? Hasn't happened in 100 years. No one really alive right now has gone through anything like this. But I'm curious if you see any kind of bonding or relationship, ties that will grow out of this.
Oh, I do see it, but I don't know whether everyone sees it. Again, you have to have the right lens on. But I see a greater empathy for us across the globe on social media, because for the first time, we're experiencing a shared historic moment, right? It's not about race. It's not about color. It's not about creed. It's for the first time something has democratized all of us and put us all in the same place. So no one can turn the other cheek and say, it's happening only there, or it's happening only here. Now we're all in it together. And one would hope that the bar of empathy has risen. The second thing of what you talked about is that trauma does create a shared, unique experience. So many of us have experienced death of close relatives, and it's kind of brought us together for sure. Also, the decreased distraction. Yes, we are more on screens, but we have less distraction. We're all just kind of living in pajamas. We're simplifying our lives. So this allows us to stratify our focus on connection. So I've seen a greater intimacy in my close relationships, a greater intimacy between my daughter and myself and my other intimate relationships, a deepening of it, because there's a simplifying, there's a stratifying, there's a focus. We're not running to baseball games, and we're not running to the theater, and we're not running to tickets to Aruba. We're just kind of sitting here. And for wisdom to develop within us, for us to truly elevate our consciousness, it does require a narrowing, a seeking of attention into the present moment, putting our attention right here, right now. And for the first time, perhaps we've been given an opportunity. Now, again, if people take it or not, that's up to them. But it's a coming back home, metaphorically, but also literally coming back to what? To this home, to the home right here. We've not paid attention to our own inner connectivity. And this is why the world is diseased and plagued, because this connection is plagued. So for the first time, there's an opportunity to stay, to sit. We've been told to go sit. And if we listen to the metaphorical message and take it to heed, we will truly discover a deep, profound capacity to do with less, to consume less, to eat less, to just as a metaphor, to take in less and to connect to what's already within. We don't need to constantly consume data and objects and materialism. We need to really just sit with who it is we are and be okay with who it is we are. So here's a golden opportunity for all these wisdom teachings. But again, people have to seek it, quest it, and become quiet. The field is open for this kind of inner solitude. But now whether we will take the pickings and ripen them in our own lives is up to each individual person.
So that's a great segue, I think, into having the ability to be self-aware and reflect. And even though, we can't sugarcoat this time right now, it's hard and it's challenging for many people who are going through, some of, the roughest moments that they've ever seen. But on those days when you're feeling like, I don't know if I can take any more of this, courtesy of Dr. Argie, we have an acronym that I'm going to put up on the screen, and it's a great hack for those days when you feel like the lockdown has no upside, but you can think of the word slack. And so slack stands for show up, be present, listen, learn, lead, acknowledge, commit, and kindness. So Dr. Argie, it sounds like being a slacker is a good thing in this case. Is that acronym a little bit of what Dr. Shefali was talking about as a way to kind of seize the opportunity and really think about it more logically?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And, Dr. Shefali is right on when she talks about this is an opportunity. Whether we take this golden opportunity, this silver lining, this way in which we can pause, and then I say cut ourselves some slack, right? This is very stressful. There's a stressful time for everyone. The anxiety levels are on fleek. People are worried. They're fearful of the unknown. Children don't have the structure or the predictability or the consistency. And so when I say cut us some slack, I mean everyone. And so the S meaning, how are we showing up? How are we showing up for ourselves? How are we showing up for our families? How are we showing up at work? Are we tired and fatigued and upset? Or are we looking within to see what the gifts are that we actually have that we can share with the world? How are we showing up? And are we on a journey, a pathway to a higher elevated version of ourselves? That's the show up. Then there's the L, listen, learn, and lead. This is really important in terms of our relationships, because sometimes what we tend to do is we want to fix it. We want to solve everything. And we want, even with our children, how can we come to a solution? And we want it quickly because we're in this fast-paced society. So listening first, right? And just hearing what your partner, what your children, what you have to say about what you're experiencing. Be true to your emotions and then learn about them. How resilient are you really? This is a pathway to get to a place where we can look at 6 months, 7 months. Nobody knew that we'd be here 8 months later. If you're like me, I thought 2 weeks, I'm going to do online therapy and then be back to my office. And here we are 6 or 7 months later. There's a lot that we needed to learn. And then lead. Well, we're all leaders in our own right. So there's leaders as your children, but also leaders within yourself. And how are you taking all of that positive energy and even some of that negative energy and showing people what we're made of? Those are the L's. The acknowledgement is simply basically saying, all right, if I'm going to cut myself some slack, how do I acknowledge where I need support? How do I acknowledge where I've messed up? I guarantee you we've all made some mistakes over the last 8 months, right? How do I use that? How does that have utility so that we can move forward together and elevate, rise up together, as opposed to just sort of giving up? The commitment, the C, extremely important because I find that many of us don't want to finish things. It gets too hard. We already have COVID fatigue, or people are dealing with touch hunger. There's so many crises going on that are swirling around us. So planting your feet and just committing, saying, I commit to this day that I'm going to grow through this day with something to offer the world or my family. And we're going to grow through this and get to the other side of this. That's the commitment that allows us to stay in it to win it. And then lastly, the K, cutting ourselves some slack. I could have found a lot of things, and I put this even in the book, a lot of things to talk about with the K, but I find that we moved into a very dark space prior to COVID, if you will. In social media, it gives us permission to say things that we shouldn't say, be mean to one another, not be kind. So the K is kind. How are we showing up with a kind voice, with a caring heart, with a way to shed light and illuminate versus darkness and hurt people? So at the end of the day, we all have to ask ourselves, are we helping to harm or healing the hurt? And that's what slack means, cutting ourselves some slack and then looking at the upside of lockdown.
I love that. That's a great reset. When you're having one of those days, you can just kind of just say to yourself, okay, remember my slack. Got to cut myself some slack. And on that note, it's now time for our Mucinex Moment. Today's live stream is brought to you by Mucinex Children's Free From. Mucinex Children's Free From. Just as Mucinex Children is free from unwanted additives, let's hear now from real moms who are free from judgment, free from pressures of perfection, just real life moms being honest about how they see the upside of this pandemic. So here's what some of them said. Kids have learned to make their own lunches and healthy choices. Amen to that. My kids have learned how to cook, and it's the best thing that has ever happened to me. We get hugs on demand. I love hugs. The kids want to keep their areas cleaner so their friends don't see the mess in the background on Zoom. True story. Never saw my children make a bed neater than the day their whole class was going to see it on the screen. No stress mornings. We can just get up from the bed and start office and school. I feel like I know more about their school day, which makes for a richer discussion about how was your day. No worrying about the dreaded school lice email. Oh, yes. I feel like hopefully we've gotten rid of that, at least for a while. More family time and less driving and less money spent on going out. So those are such great sentiments. I feel like, really just taking a look at the simple things and the simple ways that our lives are fuller and richer is a great exercise. So next, I'd like to discuss possibly one of the biggest upsides to the new normal, eating more meals at home. I'll be the first one to say I'm sick of cooking. Okay. I have lost all my mojo after 8 months of this. I was excited at the beginning. I was making soups and all sorts of things, but it's worn me down, I will admit. But this research might just make all of you out there who share my exhaustion in the kitchen feel a little better about things. Doctors at Harvard have created a study known as the Family Dinner Project, and it's led by a team of researchers who are working to create awareness about the power and the benefits of shared family meals. This research is fascinating. I'm going to show you now some of the benefits by age of child, and this list is going to blow you away. So take a look. If your child is age 1 to 5, eating meals together has been proven to improve reading and vocabulary. Children are less likely to be overweight later in life. As they get older, between the ages of 6 and 12, they've shown improved academic performance, increased fruit and vegetable intake, because family meals are usually less fried foods, etc., and a greater connection to siblings. As they get a little older still, the benefits are even more shocking. Ages 13 to 18, there's a reduced risk of smoking, substance abuse, eating disorders, teen pregnancy, violence, and depression. Now, those are some really astounding benefits. I think this study even mentioned that if you spend more time at the family dinner table, the impact on academic performance of your child can even in some cases outweigh the benefits of time spent on homework. So it's really a huge, huge benefit. And I'm certainly going to reprioritize that time with my own kids. Dr. Shefali, what do you think is so key about sharing a meal together as a family?
Well, it's really that allotment of that focused time of connection and interpersonal relationships. That it's not so much the food, it shouldn't be the focus on the food so much. It's really about setting that time where the family comes together with a communal interest and, sharing stories and making sure that that time is preserved. And that's what it's really about. It's about connection, presence, attunement to your children, and building that memory bank that children need so much to create this coherent narrative of their childhood, which then launches them. It creates security, it creates a sense of safety, it builds this a capacity to be mutually reciprocating to each other, empathy, listening skills. I mean, and that's why language becomes better, retention becomes better, because children feel heard and seen, and that's what children want the most. So it's this taking out of this sacred time in a busy moment, in a busy day, to focus on your kids and to give them that sense of presence that every kid craves from their otherwise overscheduled parents.
That is so true. One of the doctors behind the Family Dinner Project is Dr. Ann Fishel. She is a family therapist, clinical psychologist, and associate clinical professor of psychology at the Harvard Medical School. She is a badass lady, okay? She is here now to tell you a little more about the added benefit of family meals. Here's Ann.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ann Fishel, a clinical psychologist and family therapist. I'm the director and co-founder of the Family Dinner Project. There are incredible benefits of sharing meal times, benefits to the body and the brain and the mental health of kids and adults. 50% of kids are cooking with their parents in ways they didn't pre-pandemic. And goodness knows we all need all the help we can get. So if we can teach our kids some extra cooking skills and maybe they can make a couple of dinners here or there or help with the cutting of vegetables, all to the better. But it's also true that when kids are involved in any part of dinner, whether it's picking the recipe or stirring the soup or cutting vegetables or setting the table, it makes them stakeholders and they're more likely to want to eat what is on offer. And I think, kids and adults during this very challenging time of the pandemic, one of the things that we can help kids do is find some more meaning and purpose in their daily lives. And I think making contributions to the family through cooking or through setting the table or picking a game to play at the table, these are ways that kids can feel like they're really helping, they're really part of the team, they're really helping us get us through this difficult time.
So that's interesting. And she talks about, having kids be involved in the meal empowers them as stakeholders. And I think that's really key. I wanted to ask you both what you thought about, I feel like everyone went through, or a lot of people went through, this sourdough baking phase, and we're starting to get more into the family recipe that we haven't had the time to make in the past. I'll confess, I bought a pasta attachment for my mixer. I have all the good intentions of making something. It's still in the box, but I'm gonna get to it, I swear. So these new, kind of moments of, cooking for pleasure and, doing things that are, time intensive, but, maybe an opportunity to involve the kids, to help, to share or to learn, a traditional recipe as more of a ritual through food. Dr. G, I wanted to know, how does this transfer from, parent to child and really serve to create new family traditions in this time that we're living through?
Well, I think that I had a family that I was working with, and they talked about, this difficulty and the stress around COVID and the quarantine early on. And they used the reframe, which was around the kids saying that we're stuck at home, and the parents said, let's think about this as we're safe at home. If we were out there, perhaps we might not be safe, or we could be getting sick. And, as Dr. Shefali said, children need safety and security. They need definitely consistency. So when we're thinking about cooking and mealtime, as the other expert talked about, we have to think about making memories. And with the traditions, to be honest, during COVID, a lot of those traditions have been lost because people hadn't been able to travel over the summer months, and we're going into the holiday season, and people are struggling to figure out whether or not they will have a Thanksgiving meal with all of their extended family. So this is about figuring out ways to create new memories, figuring out ways to, as I call them, invest love deposits. Your expert talked about stakeholders. I call it having skin in the game. And so as you involve your children with these meals, which many people were struggling with trying to make it happen anyway prior to COVID, how do you make those love deposits so that it creates a narrative and those memories of these really difficult and challenging times actually get infused with a capacity to love, a capacity to have empathy, a capacity to communicate, have, quite frankly, difficult, sometimes courageous conversations. And as I like to say, those conversations that connect, and really figure out ways that may be very different than the old rituals, but that have the capacity to create new rituals. I think that our children, 20 years from now, they won't always remember the challenges. What they will remember is that in many cases, their parents and their family rose to the challenge and caused the family to actually elevate to a higher version of themselves. That doesn't mean that it's without challenge or difficulty. It just simply means that, it shows the family what they actually are made of. And that also, by the way, doesn't mean that around the dinner table you don't you don't just talk about everything that's good. You actually have to talk about some difficult things while you're making those meals or while you're creating those recipes. And really, it's just an opportunity for connection, as Dr. Shefali said.
And Dr. Shefali, do you see mealtime and cooking as you mentioned this memory bank that kids need to kind of propel them forward? Is that a key component to that memory bank in your mind?
Yeah, but we don't want to pressurize women who, partners who don't feel like they can cook. It's not putting more pressure. Again, it's the time spent together. It's the attunement, the attention you give your kids, the capacity to play, to be creative, to be joyful, depending on the age of your kid. Kids don't need much. And I'm sure this COVID has shown us all how little we really need, how many fewer clothes we actually needed to have bought all these years, how many fewer meals we needed to order out, and how many fewer streams of entertainment. We were misguided, and now suddenly we're managing, aren't we? We're living in the same 2-track pants and not combing our hair, and we're fine. So obviously we're realigning to a whole completely new way of living, and our expectations have become titrated. We have re-examined what life really means, I hope, what relationships really mean. And a lot of relationships are quote unquote breaking up, and that's okay. This is a time of weeding out the dysfunctional, the chaotic, the excess in our lives, and streamlining to the deep, the profound, and the meaningful.
That is the perfect segue. It's like you read my mind, Dr. Shefali. Thank you. So I'm going to go now to the topic of organization. So as many of us, myself included, are feeling the crunch of their physical space because 100% agree we have too much stuff. We have too many pairs of track pants. Yes, to the black leggings that have kept me safe during this pandemic at home. Thank you. They're doing their job. But a lot of us have begun purging and kind of recognizing, look, I don't need all this stuff around me. I'm going to be more centered and more functional if I have, a stress-free space and get rid of the clutter. And, in some ways it's just necessary. The kids need a space for schoolwork. Two parents need their own spaces to get their own jobs done. So prioritizing function, I think, is really key. We're going to now go to an organizational specialist named Marissa Hagmeyer. She's co-founder of the NEAT method. And she's going to share a hack she uses for something that many of us might be able to identify with, known as the junk drawer. Here is Marissa.
Hi everyone, my name is Marissa Hagmeyer and I'm one of the owners of NEAT Method. And I just wanted to show you guys a little organizing hack of my own. So I have no junk drawer, and believe it or not, even as an organizer, I believe that you do need a place, we'll not call it maybe a junk drawer, but just, you know, a place to put the things, the extra things. So an organized junk drawer, if you will. So this is my solution. So I have this lovely little cabinet here and one of our grid baskets with some of our canisters without lids on them that is serving as my junk drawer. And to be honest, I'm kind of loving it because it's really keeping the categories separated. I've got the cords, the pens, tools, etc. So, you know, not exactly what you would hope or wish for, but it's working out just great and is a great little hack for anyone who has a similar situation.
So that's just a really quick and easy example, but I feel like there is such a connection between your physical space and how your kind of mental space interact with one another. So Dr. Argie, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about, how working or even eating and, relaxing in a space that's free of clutter and distraction can really benefit our mental health.
Yeah, the thing about it is that mind, body, and spirit is all connected. We know this, right? And so when we're purging our physical spaces, we also need to think about the connection and how it's correlated with our mental space, right? All spaces matter. And in this pandemic, in the midst of quarantine, what I found a lot with many of my clients is they really hadn't thought about, because it snuck up on many of us, we weren't prepared for it. Nobody's ever been in a pandemic before. So they hadn't really thought about their space where they actually live. Now we're all thrown into living in the space where we're actually working. And we got to escape our home space to go to work. And sometimes that was neat and our home spaces were not so neat. So I've asked people to think about, like, what would it look like if you were able to purge both physically and mentally? What would it look like for everyone in the household to have a schedule so that you had wake up time and bedtime, you had meal times, and you had rest time and playtime, right? We all need that. And then those schedules need to go on a universal space, and it's universal space where everybody can see it. And then each person has their task of how they're going to create that space so that when they actually go into their workspace, kids or children, and by the way, I've had families had small spaces and they used a closet to create a workspace. So you can be innovative and creative. The most important thing is that you recognize that if it's chaotic in your physical space, more than likely it's going to be chaotic in your mental space, and possibly very chaotic in your emotional and your relational space. So taking some time out to figure it out, even writing it down, and then having some weekly meetings with your kids or with your partner to say, how's it going, right? Because you probably didn't get to that chaotic space overnight. So we need to cut ourselves some slack, right? And we need to be a little patient with ourselves and not expect ourselves to get to a place where everything's organized overnight, but we can get there. And some of us are just still on a journey because it takes time.
My children are still on that journey. They have not yet gotten to the destination where they realize that they have too much stuff. So Dr. Shefali, talk to me here. Give me some wisdom. The grown adults among us could know, okay, I have too many shoes. I'm not wearing shoes anymore. I'm literally wearing, the same sneakers for 8 months. I can get rid of some of the stuff I don't need. As a parent, how do you convey this minimalist realization to a kid who thinks they need everything? They need to keep the model of the planets that has glitter, that has all the planets that I can't get off the dresser because they need to keep it. How do you convey that, hey, you're gonna be more zen in this room. Everyone is not gonna have a panic attack when they walk in and see all the stuff everywhere. How do you convey that to a kid who's 6, 7, 8 years old who might not be on the same wavelength just yet?
Yeah, kids are not on the same wavelength. And for them, it's why aren't you okay with the mess? They're so zen with the mess. They're zen with noise, they're zen with chaos, sometimes more than we are. So depending on the kid you have, it's really hard to generalize with children. But I think the key here for parents is to back off our children at this point in time. There's certainly a restriction on what we're buying. I mean, that everyone's credit card bills have gone down, I hope, for the most part. So now how do we align with our children's need to cope in the way that they cope? So some children clutter, some children become over obsessive and clean and perfectionistic. Some children show their anxiety through apathy or listlessness. Some teenagers become defiant and rude. Our kids are coping. And if we can just understand that this is a time to cope, this is a time to turn things around and transform them into the best possible scenario. It is not the time to become controlling, to become overly righteous, to become dogmatic. This is the time to back off. So what if your kid has 10,000 things on the dresser? You can look at it the other way. So let it be. Why are you getting disturbed by the chaos? Why are you letting the noise bother you, right? There's a different way to approach this, which is to relax, to realign our expectations, to recontour our dreams, to just, back off the stress that we've been putting on our children, do this, then do this, then do this. And realize that, yeah, if a kid wants to live with all the soft toys on their bed, that's their choice. This is a moment to empower children to cope the way they need to cope, just like we're coping the way we need to cope.
They're coping a little too much, but I hear you. I'm going to try. I'm going to try and keep the planets, at least for another week. So we have some questions from our audience. Dr. Argie, here's one that our producers have pulled. It's hard to get my child on Zoom at the same time as my work conference calls. So if you have, a conflicting schedule where you got to set up your kid and then you've got an important meeting, who do you put first, our career or their education? Ooh, that's a good dilemma.
Ooh, that's a big one. And I can't say that I would put the pressure on any parent to say, okay, which one takes the priority? I think that they're both important. I think that we're all on the same page in this conversation that we've got to be a little kinder to ourselves. We didn't have these dilemmas before. If we went to work, our children were wherever they were, and perhaps we checked in, but the reality is that we didn't have to be. As I hear from some of my clients, they feel like they're the administrative assistant for their children, and they're constantly organizing things. So you might want to reevaluate the schedule and see if you can get a little bit more separate. But if you can't, then make your apologies in whatever way you need to, whether it's to the teacher or whether it's to your boss, and say that we're all figuring out how to do this together. I would say for most of us, if we were a little bit more patient with ourselves during this transition, because we are on a journey. We haven't arrived to our destination, as you said, Michaela. And so if we're patient, if we're kinder, if we recognize that we can turn our pain, because some of this is painful, but we can turn that pain into power when we really appreciate the process and we recognize we're all in this process together. And so that hopefully gives us a little bit of solace to say, like, okay, we're going to grow through this. We won't get over this. We will learn from this. We'll have lessons and teachable moments, certainly teachable truths about ourselves. And as we pause for this moment in time where we have an opportunity for the upside of lockdown, I think we're all going to go into 2021 recognizing that we shouldn't delete 2020. 2020 has way too much to teach us about ourselves, about our relationships, about our interest in our investments. And then we may need to, like, as Dr. Shefali said, let go of some stuff, because some of the stuff that we were holding on to, whether it be always being on time or having everything in this perfect fashion, some of that stuff was creating more anxiety. And if we're unhealthy mentally and emotionally, oftentimes that is connected to physical and wellness or lack thereof of wellness. So those are the things I think that we should do. And of course, I'm always going to say, keep talking, have these conversations and have them often and frequent, and start with the listening versus the talking so that you can fully understand where each other are coming from. Sometimes you don't even have to go to solution at that point, because what we most want often as human beings is for somebody to understand. Like, I don't believe that people care how much you know until they know how much you care. So it's the caring that I think makes the difference in our sharing.
So that's a great point in terms of caring. Dr. Shefali, we have another question from the audience for you. Should moms take the opportunity to carve out time with their better half during the workday? Much easier than trying to meet for lunch in Midtown in the old lifestyle. I guess this person might be a New Yorker. So the question is meaning, should you drop everything on a regular Tuesday and take an hour to, connect with the partner? Or are we still stuck in that, like, let's do date night on Friday and we can't go anywhere and everything's closed. So it's going to be Netflix on the couch and essentially you end up doing nothing. What do you advise?
Yeah, you have to be creative, you have to do what feels spontaneous and fresh and authentic. So, there's so much more opportunity to create those, but yeah, there's also a lot more opportunity to get on each other's nerves. So you have to create that concerted, conscious window where you're keeping it alive and you're keeping it different. It's hard now because we're all kind of seeing each other all day, every day in the pajamas, and it becomes monotonous. But again, you thrive, you adapt, you create the best out of the situation. It's got so many plus points. You're less stressed. I mean, you've listed all of them already. So why not use this moment to bond even more with your partner?
And even bond with your coworkers, partners. I will say right now, thank you to all the husbands who have walked past the Zoom with no shirt on. I mean, I've gotten to know all of you so much better. It's a true story. But why the men don't wear a shirt during the day, I don't know. But anyway, another question here, Dr. Argie, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this one, but someone is asking, how many people is a safe number in a pod?
I think that's a great question. I think that there has been a lot of stress around the pod and who's in your circle and who's not in your circle. And I would say, like, we have to try not to judge others and just try to search within ourselves with our own comfort level. What does that look like? Well, that looks like you determining for yourself what you in fact feel comfortable about, and then not allowing other people to guilt you into participating in activities that you're not comfortable with, but also not being judgmental of them if they feel more comfortable. So never before have we had to deal with this particular scenario where we're thinking about how we spend our time, because our pods had grown over the years prior to COVID. Now they're shrinking. So again, we can't determine the number for someone else, but we can determine the number for us. And if it's a pod of 2 or 3 or 4, even when we're thinking about Thanksgiving dinner, or whatever activity you want to participate in, I encourage people to just process with yourself what your comfort level is, because it doesn't feel good to find yourself in a situation and now your anxiety has skyrocketed because you said yes to something that you weren't comfortable with. And oftentimes we as women, we are people pleasers at times, and we can tend to say yes to things we should say no to. I think often out of fear versus love for ourselves. And so we just have to really appreciate how much we're struggling with these kinds of decisions, and then be a little bit kinder to ourselves when we're making those decisions.
That's great. And Dr. Shefali, the last question from the audience will go to you. They're asking, how do I get my kids to see the bright side, especially my tween and teen? That's a good one, because I feel like right now it's, you've got some kids stuck at home with their parents for 8 months. How do you get the younger ones to see the bright side?
Well, the best way to do anything with our kids is to first align with where they're at. So if they're going on and on, this is so hard, this is so hard, you go, yeah, this is hard. Don't force somebody to change their unique experience. And I think parents do that. And the second thing is that you have to model and embody the energy you want to have around you. So if they see you're okay, and if you're okay, you should be okay with your kid being in whatever mood they're in. And that's what this book is about, is how do we allow our children to feel their feelings without the need for us to micromanage and fix and control, because we feel anxiety when they feel anxiety. How do we allow our children to honor what they're feeling? It's okay for your kid to not like this. It's okay for your kid to not be okay with this or to feel panicked. These are regular, normal things. And when we validate something, we allow kids to process, integrate, and pass through the emotion. When we resist something, it actually congeals, freezes, and grows within them. It actually suffocates and paralyzes them. So there's no need to be afraid of big feelings in our children. It's okay if the kid doesn't like this, doesn't see anything positive. It's okay. That's their perspective. And by not being threatened by it, you actually allow them to perhaps enter or thaw out into a different perspective.
And just to follow up on that, I think, well, obviously we're seeing, less interpersonal face-to-face contact and more digital interaction among kids. The digital, I guess, onboarding is happening younger and younger. Do you see any potential, dangers? What is lost by this, communication now over texting and over messaging and social media, as opposed to like the face-to-face contact that, our young kids and, as they grow onto their teen years really need to develop really true social skills?
Yeah, they are developing social skills, but yeah, it is very concerning, but it was concerning even before the pandemic. This is virtual reality. It's not real. And the more face-to-face contact, the less screen time, obviously the better. We've all probably seen the documentary Social Dilemma, and we understand now that we are being brainwashed and controlled and taken away from our essence. And this was true before the pandemic, and it will be true after and during. So yes, as parents, you want to be concerned if your kid is not a teenager yet. You don't want them on screens as much as you can control. And if they are teenagers, you want to create these in-person bonding experiences as much as possible and encourage them to meet with their little pod of friends so that they don't lose that in-person warmth and vitality that is so essential. So essential.
Yeah, I would like
All
just
right,
echo
I'm
that.
going to replay that from my children right there. That's that last part. Make them listen to you on repeat.
I would just
Sorry,
echo that.
Dr. Argie.
Yeah, I just echo that the 4-letter word for love when it comes to young people is time. And so when we spend that quality time and we encourage them to spend time with others, I think that reverberates through them and it's transformative. And so I agree that the less screen time, although I would say that when we went through a pandemic in 1918 with the Spanish flu, there was no social media. And so people really were isolated. And now at least this technology gives them an opportunity. I have young people who are home from college that are living with their parents, and they live for their time to have their Zoom parties with their young people where they would have normally been in the dorm. So I see it as a both end, that yes, that this is an opportunity for them to still connect with their friends. But if we can create some socially distant dating opportunities for our children where they can connect, then we need to try to do that as much as possible as well.
Awesome. So we are almost out of time, but I wanted to let everyone know that our next live event will be on November 17th, and it will be about a holiday for the history books, how to stay safe and connected this season. It's going to be a tough one this year. We will have with us doctors from Johns Hopkins, along with actor and activist Cleo Wade. Register now at scarymommy.com/live-work-thrive. So thank you so much to our incredible panelists. I know you're both very busy professionals. We really appreciate you being here with us tonight, sharing your knowledge. Dr. Argie, check out her book, Courageous Conversations Connect. And Dr. Shefali, pick up a copy of her latest title, Superpowered. She's going to show it to you right there. I love that cover. Beautiful.
For kids,
Love the brightness.
It helps parents help their kids deal with anxiety. So
Absolutely.
I think we all need a copy of both of these by the nightstand right now. Because guess what? You're not going anywhere for a while, people. So read a book. Here we go. So on that note, have a great night. Remember also, there are only 7 days until the election. So get out there and vote like a mother, because we are moms and we know how to live, work, and thrive. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
thank you, guys. Thank you.